On May 15, 1911, the Supreme Court ordered Standard Oil dissolved. At its peak, this one company refined 90% of America's oil. It controlled the pipelines. It controlled the rail cars. It controlled the barrels themselves. The company was called Standard Oil. Its founder's fortune, adjusted for the economy's size, has never since been matched. His name was John D. Rockefeller. Not Gates, not Bezos, not Musk. Nobody since has come close. By the time the courts broke his empire apart, it was already too late to matter. Breaking up Standard Oil didn't destroy the empire. It just renamed the pieces. To understand how, you have to go back to a bookkeeping desk in Cleveland in 1855. John D. Rockefeller was born in 1839, the son of a traveling con man. His father sold fake medicine under a fake name. His son sold precision instead. At 16, Rockefeller took his first job for $3.50 a week. He tracked every expense to the quarter cent for the rest of his life. In 1863, he put $4,000 into a small oil refinery outside Cleveland. Oil had been discovered in Pennsylvania only 4 years earlier. The industry was chaos. Hundreds of refineries opened almost overnight. Most were wasteful. Most eventually failed. Rockefeller saw what almost nobody else did. The real money wasn't in drilling for oil. It was in refining it. Drilling was a gamble. Refining was a choke point. In 1870, Rockefeller incorporated Standard Oil with $1 million in capital. He controlled 10% of American refining before turning 31. Control the bottleneck, and you control the industry. That was Rockefeller's entire strategy. Standard Oil's rise ran on 4 tactics almost none of its rivals were willing to use. First, secret deals with the railroads that no competitor ever got to see. In 1872, Rockefeller helped form the South Improvement Company with 3 major railroads. The deal handed Standard Oil rebates of up to 50% on its own shipments. It also paid Standard Oil a fee every time a rival's oil ship passed it. Rivals couldn't compete with a price they weren't even allowed to see. Second, when prices couldn't undercut a rival, Rockefeller simply bought the rival. In 6 weeks during 1872, Standard Oil bought 22 of Cleveland's 26 refineries. Locals called it the Cleveland Massacre. Owners were shown Standard Oil's freight rates and given exactly one real choice. Most sold. The ones who refused watched their prices collapse within months. In 1879, a group of rivals built the Tidewater Pipeline to bypass Standard Oil entirely. For the first time, oil reached the East Coast without touching a single Standard Oil pipe. Within a few years, Standard Oil had quietly bought a controlling stake in Tidewater too. Every attempt to build around Standard Oil ended the same way. Inside Standard Oil. Third, Rockefeller stopped being just a refiner and became everything at once. Standard Oil built its own pipelines, so it no longer needed the railroads at all. It built barrel factories, tank cars, warehouses, and sales offices in nearly every state. By 1880, Standard Oil refined roughly 90% of America's oil. Fourth, wherever a rival held on, Standard Oil cut prices below its own cost. It could absorb the losses for years. Local competitors could not. Once the rival collapsed, prices went right back up. Decades later, this got a name, predatory pricing. In the 1870s, it was just called business. Those railroad rebates became illegal within a decade, but by then it hardly mattered. The buyouts had already turned 26 rivals in Cleveland into one company. The vertical integration meant Standard Oil touched oil from the ground to the storefront, and the price wars ensured no small refiner survived long enough to fight back. In 1882, Rockefeller's lawyer Samuel Dodd invented an entirely new legal structure. It was called the trust. 41 companies handed their stock to 9 trustees. On paper, Standard Oil still looked like dozens of independent businesses. In reality, one board controlled all of them. Other industries copied the model within a decade. Sugar, whiskey, tobacco, steel. The word trust entered the American vocabulary as a synonym for monopoly. That's also where the phrase trust busting came from. Standard Oil's defenders had one argument that was actually true. Between 1870 and 1885, the price of kerosene fell by roughly 2/3. Efficiency was real. Americans paid less to light their homes than ever before. That efficiency became the best legal defense Standard Oil had. By 1890, Standard Oil was the largest corporation on earth. Some years, it earned more profit than the entire federal government's budget. This is the story of how one company built America's first true monopoly. In 1902, a journalist named Ida Tarbell began digging into Standard Oil's history. Her own father had been a small oil producer, crushed by Standard Oil decades earlier. Tarbell spent 3 years reading court records, corporate filings, and private letters. In November 1902, McClure's magazine published the first chapter of her investigation. It ran for 19 installments across 2 years. Tarbell didn't accuse Rockefeller of one crime. She documented a pattern spanning 30 years. The public had long suspected Standard Oil was ruthless. Now, they had the paperwork. Tarbell's work turned a rumor into evidence, and evidence into national outrage. President Theodore Roosevelt read it, so did Congress. In 1907, Roosevelt described men like Rockefeller in a single, lasting phrase. In 1906, the Department of Justice sued Standard Oil under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The Sherman Act had existed since 1890. Nobody had used it against a company this size. The case took nearly 5 years to reach the Supreme Court. Standard Oil's lawyers argued the company had simply competed better than everyone else. The government argued that better wasn't the same thing as legal. On May 15, 1911, the Supreme Court ruled against Standard Oil. The court found the company guilty of monopolizing trade in violation of federal law. It gave Standard Oil just 6 months to complete the breakup. The remedy was total. Standard Oil would split into 34 independent companies. Rockefeller wasn't even in the courtroom. He was playing golf when he heard the verdict. He reportedly told his golf partner one thing: buy Standard Oil stock. It may have been the best advice he ever gave. Each of the 34 new companies kept its share of the old empire's customers and assets. Rockefeller, as the largest shareholder, held stock in all 34 of them. The largest piece, Standard Oil of New Jersey, later became Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco, later absorbed into BP. In 1999, two of the largest pieces merged again into ExxonMobil. Within a year, the combined value of all 34 companies had roughly doubled. The breakup didn't cost Rockefeller his fortune. It multiplied it. By some estimates, his personal wealth peaked around 1913, near $900 million. Adjusted for the size of today's economy, that fortune would run into the hundreds of billions. At the time of the breakup, Standard Oil still employed tens of thousands of workers. The pieces of Standard Oil didn't disappear. They became the backbone of the modern oil industry. The Supreme Court broke up one company. The market quietly let the pieces recombine for a century. Standard Oil's fall looked nothing like a bankruptcy. There were no layoffs, no liquidation, no collapse in revenue. The company didn't lose money. It lost its shape. That was the government's entire point. Some victories look nothing like defeat. Standard Oil is the reason American antitrust law exists in the form it does today. The case against Microsoft in 1998 traced its legal roots back to this same ruling. So did the Justice Department's 2020 case against Google. So did the FTC's 2023 case against Amazon. The exact law used against Standard Oil in 1906 is still the one used today. On the day Standard Oil was broken apart, it still controlled 90% of American oil within a year. It was worth more broken than it had ever been whole. Rockefeller built history's first great American monopoly by controlling one single bottleneck. The government spent nearly 4 decades trying to punish him for it. In the end, the punishment made him richer than the monopoly ever had. Standard Oil taught corporate America a lesson no regulator ever intended to teach. Breaking up a monopoly doesn't always destroy the empire. Sometimes it just diversifies it into 34 smaller empires, each one still his. Rockefeller didn't lose in 1911. He simply learned that 90% of one company was worth less than 100% of 34.